Welcome to Soundbreaker. On today's episode, we're talking to Sean Adams from Drown in Sound. Thank you for joining us. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with you, could you please give us a short intro and introduce yourself? About yourself.
So I'm Sean. I grew up on the south coast of England, where I started a music blog called Drowned in Sound in the year 2000. I'd promoted gigs. I've managed artists. I started a podcast in 2005 when I had to explain a lot about what a podcast was to anyone I wanted to listen. But I currently manage Charlotte Church, the singer, and an artist called the Anchoress. And I rebooted Drowned in Sound last year as a newsletter and a podcast.
Lovely. We're going to dive into all of these interesting, insightful things that you're going to tell us about. Before we dive into anything, is it possible to take us a bit back to your teenage years or even younger than that? Growing up, what influenced you to take that path into music? Was it your parents, groups, relatives, or just personal interest that you grabbed on while you were a kid?
So I was obsessed with side two of Low by David Bowie when I was quite young,
Uh huh.
which is the ambient side. Which for a 4-year-old, I was in my mum's Volkswagen Beetle, and apparently it was just really calming, and I used to ask for it to be put on. So I was clearly a music snob from a very young age. And I got into all my dad's Motown records. Like I remember listening to Tears of a Clown on repeat one day.
Hmm.
Just couldn't quite work out how a song can be so sad and melancholic lyrically and so joyful. I remember listening to my dad's Devo records because I'd started listening to Slipknot, and he's like, "Kids have done boiler suits before. You need to listen to this." So my family had nothing to do with music. They're both very working class. My mum's a hairdresser. My dad's a painter and decorator. No connections to the music industry whatsoever. At about 14, 15, I'd learned how to do very basic web building and built the local music venues website when I was
Hmm.
16. And then I ended up getting a job in the venue, putting on shows. I got a job in the local record shop as my summer job. Um, and I was obsessed with reading music magazines. It was obviously tail end of Britpop, so British music scene was quite exciting in the late 90s. And was just really bitten by the media I was consuming. I remember reading Shakespeare in class and Lester Bang's writing collections at home. So
Uh-huh.
I just really wanted to write about music, curate it, stop making mixtapes for my friends, and start telling people on the internet, which was just kicking off in 1998, about the music
S-
I thought was good.
Sweet. Well, you did get some of the creative side from your parents,
Yeah.
mom and dad. They're both creative, so
Yeah.
that's very interesting. And you took it to your own path, and you got involved in tech, so you had also interest in tech
Yeah.
because you said you developed a couple of sites when you were 16 years old.
Using whatever the like Microsoft front page was, where it was basically like using Word. It was like one of the original like WYSIWYG web developer tools. So it was very basic. But I actually learned how to do that with my nan.
Uh
My
huh.
my nan was an accountant, and she was part of the Inner Wheel, which is like a charity group. And
Got
we
it.
built the first ever Inner Wheel website for their local branch. So
Well, let's dive into Drowned in Music. Tell us about the founding of Drowned in Sound and how it involved from music community and publication to a record label. And it's really, I want to know. It's pretty interesting because I had a record label in the past, so it's
yeah.
always you start on one end, then you end up in the other end. And what were some of the key milestones along the way?
So I'd been doing an email newsletter in
Yeah.
1999, the 1998, 2000, when I was finishing at school, basically.
Mm.
Um, and lots of people wanted to write for it. And I was like, well, this should be a website now and not just an email. And it's quite funny that the industry's gone back to email in the last few years. Um, and so I posted on a lot of different forums saying, can I find someone to build a website? Some kid on the Radiohead message board built it in his summer holidays. I've never even met the guy that built the original website because there was no WordPress or Blogger back then.
Uh
So
huh.
we built our own infrastructure. Um, and what I wanted to do was, I was reading lots of fanzines, and those fanzine writers didn't have websites. So I was asking them, rather than wait 4 months to read your review when you publish it, do you want to publish it straight away on our website? So we kind of built a platform for other music fans to express themselves. Um, a few years in, we were promoting gigs in London. And a lot of the artists we were writing about, we couldn't write about them anymore because no one was releasing their records. So I started asking artists, can I put your single out? Because I'd found an investor with a small pot of money. So that's how the label began, was kind of releasing singles. I released a band called the Koreans, who were a really fun British, like two singing front bands. They sounded a bit like Phoenix.
Hmm.
Um, then the Kaiser Chiefs were the second band I released, and they went on to have great success. I worked with Bat for Lashes, a band called Blood Red Shoes, Metric, The Stills, and the biggest artist, well, the biggest album we released was Martha Wainwright's debut album,
Hmm.
Rufus Wainwright's sister, and part of the Loudon and Kate McGarrigle kind of dynasty. And she was phenomenal. I'd seen her play. Went to the merch there. She had nothing for sale, so I emailed the manager to put an EP out because that was all she had at the time. And he said, "But
Interesting.
if you double it, you can release the album." And I was like, "Okay." I'd always been obsessed with labels, so
Yes.
I grew up as a young Oasis fan, so I was really into, like, I got into the Creation Records catalog from quite an early age. Um,
Interesting.
I was into kind of skateboarding and surf videos, and there was loads of like Epitaph and Fat Rex and all those kind of labels. So I got in. You could buy label samplers in record shops for like 1.99. So I was getting, they were all I could afford. So I was really getting a set taste of record labels. So I think that, and at 19, I met Tony Wilson from Factory Records. And Tony really took me under his wing. So I kind of
Wow.
couldn't not start a label and take it seriously.
It seems like you always had that entrepreneurial mindset that kind of led you also to keep going forward and being inquisitive and curious about the music business and just keep adding and climbing in
Mm.
up. Amazing. Could you share some of the insights into the process and challenges that you faced while launching, the careers of notable artists such as Kaiser Chief and Bad for Lashes and through your label?
So obviously that was early 2000s and the industry
Yeah.
was quite different. Back then I was trying to get CD singles into record shops, which I know in the US CD singles were never a big thing, but in the UK we sold like 2000 like two track
Yeah.
CDs.
Yeah, CD singles. I remember I got into them back in the day, and they were used by major labels. Major labels hated them because they say the
Mm,
same price to cost to manufacture a single,
yeah.
it costs to manufacture an album. So they used them always for like promotional. It was a promotional tools.
Mm.
Record store wanted them because they want to generate the sales. They don't care.
They wanted the footfall as well and get people in the habit. Like getting people in the
Yes,
habit of spending money on music is not something we try and encourage now, and
yes,
like
yeah,
that feels like quite a big cog that's missing. So I guess the challenges then are very different to the challenges now. Like the challenge then was figuring out what I was doing. Like when I worked with Martha Wainwright, I was 21. I had a globe. The record was coming out on different labels around the world. I was working with Barbara Sharon, who's the press officer for Elton John and Madonna, and she was amazing. But I was telling her what to do as like a 21-year-old that kind of like, and I set quite a clear, we set a really simple task of we want 10 fans of the record.
hmm
I didn't
hmm
want 100 bits of press. I wanted 10 people that would be with us for like 18 months. Because as a journalist, that was what I wanted. It's like to be part of the family of the artist. And
interesting.
that really paid off. But it took a year for some of those people that came to see the like first London show to then write their big feature. So I think I took a lot of being a fan and being a journalist and trying to marry those two things together. Of really, like, now it feels really different because there's 120,000 songs released every day and you're just adding to a database, and it doesn't feel like releasing music, and
No,
it
no.
feels like you're competing with who's spending the most on Meta or Google or Twitter on adverts. Like, it doesn't feel like you're doing the same thing. So
It
yeah,
lost something. Is that what you're saying?
mhm,
It lost
yeah.
a bit of it. Yes, the flair that it had in the past.
Like
How
I sometimes have to message my artist happy release day, otherwise they will forget it's out.
interesting. How did you identify a nature? Or nurture, I should say. Excuse me, nurture the talent. And what strategies did you, employ to help these artists succeed in the music industry?
I think I've always wanted to empower artists rather
Hmm.
than do anything else. So, like, one of the first meetings I had that really was just really inspiring. Bat Flashes came in with a mood board because she'd come
Hmm.
from an art background, and she just gave me a visual sense of these are all the touch points of what I'm making and what I'm doing.
Hmm.
And she's like, I want people to see me before they hear me, because this was 2005 or so,
Yeah.
and she was like, I'm a visual artist and my music soundtracks my world, and I want people to see the world as much as hear it. And I think she was a bit ahead of the curve with, like, the platforms didn't allow it. We were putting photographs at the top of emails. Like, that was about the
Yes.
best we could do at the time. Um,
Interesting.
and I think a lot of artists are really, like, the artists I really love are really into world building. So I'm a massive Nine Inch Nails fan, and I think Trent Reznor's always had a sense of a sonic world that he builds, and then the visuals that go with it, the intensity of the live show, like the storytelling around a lot of the record. And like the similar with Bjork. Like, Bjork's one of my favorite artists, and having that
Yes.
feeling of a whole world that you either close your eyes and you're in it,
Yes.
or you read the National Geographic special that she's done, or, like, I think that's to empower and inspire artists to try and do some of those things has been,
Hmm.
I've not always had the budget to do it, but to kind of allow them to be true to who they want to be, and to really find, I think my one of my skills that I've always, it took me a while to realize that I had, was finding the, like, small kernel in a project and then
Hmm.
trying to work out to pop that piece of popcorn. So to really find what it is about what they're doing that resonates and that's unique about them. And that's actually not something that it's obviously the job of an A&R person to try and do that, but
Yeah, I
often,
mean, yeah, and you still practice a lot of these things. You're really nurturing the artist the way it should be.
yeah.
And sadly, it's not no longer about that anymore. It's no longer. But
Mm.
that's interesting and really, how should I say, something unique. What are you doing?
And
Really
I
unique. Yeah.
and I think with, like, the Anchoress,
Yes.
she's released 2 studio albums so far. The most
Yeah.
recent one, The Art of Losing. I
Hmm.
mean, Elton John was a fan of it, and that's about as high a compliment as I think you can get of a record.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and but the album's called The Art of Losing, and we really worked on how we could tell the story of what you learn from grief. And once
Hmm.
we found that sentence, there was a podcast that she did interviewing different poets and
Hmm.
campaigners and people that have turned their grief into something positive. We really
I
thought
like that.
about the visuals of the
Yeah.
record, and but it allowed her also to go into interviews and really know what she was talking about, thinking about. And I got a lot of artists to write the track by track guide to the record
Amazing.
and that's
Uh-huh.
the first thing the press officer gets. It's the first, and, like, in doing that, you learn, oh, well, this photographer inspired this song. It's like, should we look at doing a photography exhibition with the record, or should we look at, so, and I think a lot of that, like, dredging for ideas is
Yes.
like, that's the bit that excites me at the very start of a project.
Um, Drown in Sound has been recognized for its pioneering initiatives, including an award winning podcast, groundbreaking playlist features. Could you share some insights into the development of these initiatives and what inspired their creation, and what impact did they have on the music community and the platform audiences or audience?
So the the record label taught me one really important lesson, which was when you release a record, people talk about Drowned in Sound on national
Yes.
radio, in the press, and it brought an audience to us, allowing our artists to kind of go out and represent us, and people go, well, these people must have good taste. Let's see what other things they're recommending. Um, so that made me realize anything we did, there's an investment of time and energy
Hmm.
that could benefit us in unexpected and unintended ways. So podcasting in 2005 was not as exciting as it is now and as an obvious thing to do.
Hmm.
We really wanted to have our own radio show, and we were like, well, literally Steve Jobs described a podcast as putting a radio show on your iPod. So we went and made a podcast, and I mean it was 98 kilobyte quality, so the sound quality wasn't great. But we, instead of having a radio DJ do a 1 minute link, as you can tell, I ramble a lot. So we were doing like 5 minute conversations. We did like
Yes.
a South by Southwest special where we recommended artists to go see. We had someone come in that had been lots of times,
Hmm.
talked about what it's like, why the industry goes, what to expect, where the best barbecue was, all those kind of things. And it became a sound like the moments of the podcast were kind of, we had the Cribs come in, a band I really love, and they just
Mm.
played me the influences to one of their records. They played me some music I'd never heard before. They just been working Elton John's in not Elton John, the guy from Orange Juice. I've forgotten his name off the top of my
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Elvis. I don't know, why have I got a complete mind blank? Anyway, um, and yeah, they just played us loads of records and like things they'd picked up on in the studio,
Hmm.
and it allowed for a really different type of artist interview than we were used to doing for
Hmm.
print or for the website. So I really liked that, and I think the had we stopped playing music because there was no royalty structure, as there still isn't for podcasts. We were being asked to pay an extortionate amount of money to play music on the podcast back then. So there's lots of different things. Like I started when Spotify was in beta. I messaged them and I made them a monthly playlist which went on their blog. I could see the platform was going to. I mean, it sounds stupid now to say I could thought it was going to get big,
Hmm.
but it didn't seem as obvious at the time when I met Daniel
I
Ecker.
hope you bought some shares.
No.
I
uh,
didn't either.
the And then like the Quietus website, we were
Yeah.
offered an advance on our advertising money to kind of reach different demographics. So
Wow.
it was one of like four other websites. We were basically given a year's advance of ad money um, by B Sky B.
Well, speaking of the Quietus,
Yeah.
the decision to launch a spin-off like the Quietus must have involved careful consideration and strategic. You mentioned, so let's talk about it. Strategic planning. Could you provide some of the insights into the decision, making the process behind launching such a spin-off website, and what factors were taken into account, and and how did these websites, complement the offering of, drowned in music while catering to a different audience, or
Well,
audiences or niches within the music community?
it seemed to me that there was a part of what Drowning Sound was doing that
Mm-hmm.
was quite unique because we were covering pop records and ambient records and electronic records, but what we weren't really covering was the we were writing very much for an audience our age. We were writing for people under 30 at the time who
Mm-hmm.
were kind of would understand the jokes and memes in some of our reviews, and but what we weren't really doing was satisfying maybe the average 50-year-old
Mm-hmm.
that still had the appetite for music as a 21-year-old, who wanted to know about the critically acclaimed records, but they'd also would love to read a 30th anniversary piece on an album they loved. um, but it wasn't the kind of music which Uncut and Mojo and Q Magazine was covering. It was bands like Suicide or Jonathan Richmond or Metallica, or
Mm-hmm.
so it was like a different. And I think what we figured was we could do something which was a bit more essay led, a lot less news focused,
Mm-hmm.
um, and a lot less record review focused. Like they do record reviews, but that wasn't the core of. With Drowning Sound, the record reviews are pretty much the core of what we did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that I wasn't. We were only involved in it for the first year because the funding got pulled after that. Because that was when the UK financial crash or the global financial crash happened in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
And we left the guys to go off and run it themselves. Because there was advertising fell off a cliff just like the economy did. So, and I think that there was definitely. I mean, we did. There was two other websites. There was one called Thrash Hits, which
Mm-hmm.
was, as you'd imagine, quite a loud, heavy music website. There weren't really many great British websites that were about heavy music. So Kerrang magazine didn't really have a website at the time. And then the other was a site called The Lipster, which
Mm-hmm.
was, we think, the first music publication launched and edited by women. So it was had a similar vibe to Jezebel and Bust.
You know, I'm the more I'm talking to you, you have a little crystal ball or a vision that you've always been ahead of the curve, buddy. I like that.
Yeah, tried to
You've been
be.
a yes, amazing, amazing. But that ball wasn't around, I guess, when you got involved with Spotify to invest in them.
Well, it was also I should have carried on doing the podcast in 2000.
Yeah,
Like,
because that could become something even bigger.
yeah, and
Yeah,
so I think the distraction of launching. Well, it's also the distraction of where the money was coming from. I couldn't even explain to an advertiser what a podcast was, let alone get them to buy an advert on one. So
amazing how time changed.
yeah,
Amazing, yes. Managing musicians like Charlotte Church, Ed Harcourt, and Anchoras, I think I
yeah,
pronounced it right,
yeah.
likely, involved in various challenges and opportunities. Can you share some of the your experiences working with these artists? What strategies did you employ, support their careers, and navigate the complexity, in the music industry?
So I called my management company CCCLX, which is
Uh huh.
360 in Roman numerals, because a manager is the only person that's involved in the 360 of an artist's career. Um, it was kind of funny because I always think Roman numerals look cool at the end of a film. So, and the challenges are huge. Like the amount of different things that I mean, any self-releasing artist will tell you how much they are looking after, and then a manager can only do so much more than the artist.
Correct.
Um, and I think that like some of the best producers I've spoken to say their job's a lot like therapy a lot of the time, and a lot
Hmm.
of like managing an artist's expectation often becomes as big a job as managing their careers, like making sure that they're aware of what is and isn't possible, like if they want to do something, what that compromises elsewhere. Really helping an artist think about um the kind of like tone of voice of a campaign and things like that, because I think storytelling, as lots of different people in the industry will tell you, is one of the central things now. And but really thinking about the short versions of the story, because obviously there's a
Hmm.
lot of time where you might only get to quickly talk about a project in a radio interview, or so like to really hone in on what those are. But also just like I think trying to monetize music right now is hard. And with Ed Harcourt, we did a partnership with Burberry, which kept us going for 4 years. He signed to Polydor when I was managing him for his seventh album, and artists don't traditionally sign to major labels on their seventh album. They normally sign on their first or second. Um,
Yes.
he was producing Sophie Ellis Bextor at the time and writing for James Bay and Paloma Faith. And we were trying to get Spotify to make it easier to show who the songwriter was at the time. Again, another battle where I was way too early in and burning up too much energy and time trying to get right. So, yeah, just trying to like empower artists, I think, is what I've always tried to do, to
Yes.
like allow them to
Yes.
be themselves. And I think that's pretty simple. So,
Yes, very important.
mm,
Collaborating and collaboration in music business is very important.
mm,
And you collaborated with Max Richter,
yeah.
and it must have been enriching experience for you. Can you tell us about the challenges and the collaboration and how it influenced you, and how should I say, what did you learn from it, and what kind of impact it had on you?
So I spent a year working with Max Richter. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorite composers.
Yes.
Um, I got to work on the Voices project, which is a soundtrack to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's one of the most
Yeah.
powerful and important records I think I've ever been involved in. Um, he's I mean, he was working on projects for Apple and Fendi, and we were
Yeah.
having meetings with, like, I was coming out of a Fendi meeting and a Universal meeting, and going into a Human Rights Watch meeting, which was
Yes.
to me the Human Rights Watch meetings were much more exciting.
Hmm.
And I think that he's just a really inspiring person, but he's not someone that really he knows how to play instruments. Playing the internet's a whole other thing, and he wasn't like I what so we came up with a really simple strategy. Every 3 months I'd interview him for an hour, and I would create videos, captions for photos, come up with different ideas for posts. I mean,
Hmm.
we'd be messaging all the time, but once a month we'd sit down for an hour, or once every 3 months we sit down for an hour, and it worked really well. We created promo, but he released 4 albums in a year when I was working for him. It was a lot to do for one artist.
Wow.
And he had a
Wow.
management team, and obviously he's on a major label, but I don't know any other artist who releases 4 albums in a year. I think actually it might have been three, but I think the fourth one came just after I left.
Hmm.
But that's a lot of thinking about what the campaign is, communicating it, being
Yes.
involved in where the press thing might be happening, so you know what you might be doing online. And
Yeah.
but I think telling stories around instrumental music is also fascinating. Like we were making little beautiful vignette videos, were basically timeline cleanses. So you'd be
Mm.
scrolling, and suddenly you'd be like black and white water just pouring slowly, and you turn the music on, and it's a minute of Max's music soundtracking kind of a lake. Or you'd scroll and scroll and scroll, and there'd be a gentle fire in Max's music playing. So we went against the grain of what social platforms,
Yes.
but it's what his music does. It soundtracks moments. So if it gave someone a 30 seconds out of their day, then that kind of felt like a nice way of it being on platforms. So yeah,
Let's talk about.
he was amazing, and they launched a recording studio while I was there as well. So that
Wow.
was kind of the main solar powered in the beautiful British countryside. So yeah, that was one of my main projects, was to try and work out how they were going to get a personality and a presence for that too. So
Running a social media campaign for BBC, which, as you mentioned a little while
yeah.
ago, for over 4 years, it presented kind of both highlights and challenges for you. Can you share some of the key highlights, the challenges that you encountered through your time running this, the social media for BBC, and some of the setbacks and obstacles that you kind of came across, and how did you overcome them?
So I worked for the BBC Radio 6 Music for four
Yeah.
years.
Yes.
And probably the biggest highlight was St. Vincent came in for half an hour, and I
Hmm.
sent this pitch to her PR. She did her life in 6 riffs. And if you've ever seen Annie Clark, who St. Vincent play guitar, she's incredibly talented. But
Hmm.
even more talented, being the only person sitting in a room with her with a couple of cameras. And I think it had 2 million views within 48 hours, this video we put out. She sat and
Hmm.
she played Hendrix, she played Tool, she played I can't remember, she played Nirvana, but she
Hmm.
talked about how those songs came into her life, and like how they informed her guitar playing. And but we still had 10 minutes left to record an Instagram takeover, and lots of other. We recorded a whole bunch of stuff, and this was to celebrate 100 years since women got the vote in the UK. We did like a whole takeover of our social channels with women that was really inspiring. And but I also got to like interview Jodie Whittaker, who was Doctor Who. I got to Phoebe Bridgers and Bright Eyes came in when they were launching their Better Oblivion community
Hmm.
center project, and they did their life in 6 sad songs. And they were sat and sung Puff the Magic Dragon, and Phoebe sung one of Connor's songs, and Connor sung one of Phoebe's songs. And this was
Wow.
just before Phoebe Bridgers became global megastar Phoebe Bridgers. So
Uh-huh.
it was quite a fun moment.
Interesting.
So it was lots of the challenges though were creating video, because obviously social platforms are so video led, for a radio station which is obviously very audio. And most of the time it's people sitting in front of a microphone talking, which does not make for the most compelling social media content. So getting when people coming in really coming up with good ideas for them to do, like we had Louis Theroux, the TV documentary maker, did a takeover, and I got him to talk about his favorite best of album, which
Hmm.
seems like a really stupid question, but he said the David Bowie best of is his favorite David Bowie album. But that sparked a conversation of people talking about their favorite best of albums on our social channels. So I got Jodie Whittaker talking about what gigs she would time travel to in the TARDIS, which got people thinking about what's the one gig you want to travel back to or forward to. Um, so really thinking about building community, because a radio station's already got a community, and how
Yes.
do you do that asynchronously on social channels? But the BBC is a challenging place to work. It's a big oil tanker, and I'm someone that's been used to working on my own for the 18 years before I worked there. So to be told lots of you need to go get this sign off, and
So it was pretty challenging for you then,
yeah,
well, mentally.
having to like remember that I had to
Yes,
defer decisions
yes,
to people, and
absolutely.
yeah,
Um, the relaunch of Drowned in Sound as a newsletter
hmm,
and audio publication focused on fairness, inclusion, sustainability, and experimental technology
hmm.
seems to reflect a significant shift in the platform direction. Please tell us about that.
So I think I've moved where my head is about music at the moment to
Hmm.
a point where most media has always been really artist focused,
Hmm.
and I think it should be idea focused, and that can be a location, it could be a type of technology, it could be something happening culturally, but I think music discovery can happen off the back of lots of different topics. So say I want to write about VR, well, there's about 4 artists that have experimented with it. What's more
Hmm.
exciting is to think about the records which don't have a presence in VR. How might that work? Like
Hmm.
the I'm doing a monthly music recommendations newsletter, and it's just one newsletter a month with music recommendations in. So it's really focused. It's the opposite of everything else where there's like endless recommendations. And that's works quite well so far. Um, the podcast season at the moment, I'm talking to people about the future of the music press, which touches on a lot of different topics. But like, I interviewed Kat Tembaj from NBC, and
Hmm.
we ended up talking about how the freedom of speech conversations online actually silence a lot of people that want to speak, because you get the kickback from very right wing people very quickly. I talked to um, someone about that runs their own production school off the back of their music, and how that's kind of a conversion from, because in
And,
journalism we're not seeing that same like what's the conversion pipe from reading something to doing something else. So
and that's what got you involved in the movement forward, the political group, alongside with Carol Verdman and show. Is that one?
not really.
How?
I think I've always been quite a political person. Like
Yes.
our first ever tour that Drown Sound did was with Love Music Hate
Yeah.
Racism.
Yeah.
um my I was into political punk music from like 16.
Yes.
And a lot of the like hip hop records, which now would be kind of like Kendrick Lamar, kind of was probably really inspired by like Dead Prez and Mos Def and Dilated Peoples, and
Bob Marley.
yeah, Bob Marley was
Yes.
always on in the car.
Yes.
And I think that there's so I got involved. The movement forward is so it's a British political campaign. We're
Yeah.
focusing on getting people to tactically vote the government out, because our voting system is means that the vote gets diluted on the progressive side. So people vote for the Greens and Liberal Democrats, and a Tory gets in by like 100 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Vorderman's really involved in it. She was a big TV presenter in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a real force. She was on a program called Countdown, which is basically a maths program. Which might not sound. It was one of the most successful TV programs in the UK, and
And
she would do
that's
maths in her head on the
yeah.
shows.
And how do you see that intersecting with music? Like, or
So the leader of the campaign, the guy that's head of the project, he was
yeah.
involved. He was involved in Make Poverty History, and Live 8. So his music's always been part of that. He was involved with Music for EU, which was a anti-Brexit campaign. So I think what my mission is, like we did a test run last year for the local elections. Robert Smith
Yeah.
from The Cure shared it. Tim Burgess from The Charlatans shared it. And artists can speak to their audiences in a
Yeah.
way that very few other people can. So they've got that intimate connection to their audience. So getting the music industry to talk about the next season of the podcast is about climate change, the very few things the industry's doing. So like what there's like some festivals that are completely vegan. Is that something that all festivals could be doing? Probably not. Is there something that other festivals could learn from it, even if they took 3 vegan food trucks? I've interviewed someone about sustainable vinyl, which this week Billie Eilish has put in the headlines, but
Yes.
um, so I think there's just lots of small things the industry can do. So
Yes. Your role of as a launch producer for The Troll, a podcast
mm,
hosted by Marina
yeah,
Perkis and Jimma Fort.
Forte, yeah.
And yeah, Forte. And excuse me. And what were some of the, challenges, successes that you encountered during the launch process? And
S-
what got you involved in that?
So they're
What
both
made you want to be involved in that?
they're both really political. Marina's
Yeah.
amazing on Twitter.
Yeah.
She goes in and often holds member of the government to account on TV.
Yeah.
She's very
Yeah.
funny. And I was like, why don't you have a podcast? And she was like, I've not come up with the right idea. So we came up with an idea. Gemma's often pops up on very similar TV programs to her. They've got a similar kind
Yeah.
of mindset. Gemma used to be like a host on the Disney Channel, but she also does stuff for QVC, the shopping channel. So she's very media-y. And we came up with this really simple idea that they'll troll Twitter, so scroll through Twitter so you don't have to. So what they do is they play out video clips that have gone viral so it's a political podcast. And I'd never really produced something for someone else before, so I just thought this is a fun challenge. And the footballer Gary Lineker now owns the podcast and has been investing in it. So I was involved for the first 6 months, but we took it from, I think we got to 10,000 subscribers within the first month, which for a small podcast that we were literally promoting on their Twitter accounts was quite a quick,
Hmm.
but people really loved it. And it was being mentioned in like political publications and on the news and stuff quite quickly. So, um,
I mean, I have to say, when I was putting the questions together for you, uh, I mean, your list of accolades and accomplishments is pretty impressive. I have to say,
thank you.
I really do, Sean. And what keeps you going? What motivates you to keep going? Always for new ideas, new things, and what inspires you? Like you don't stop. Like every question I ask, I had to edit the questions. Like this guy doesn't even stop. I'm like, talk about somebody actually driven and motivated and always inquisitive and coming up with new things, new ideas. And, I mean, yes, it's a mindset for sure. But again, please share some of these things with us. And not just for me,
Yeah.
for our, Soundbreaker audience, people who's going to also be inspired by watching this episode and say, wow, look at this guy. I want to be like him.
So,
He inspired me to do this. And please share it. It's very important.
so I think I'm quite a contrary person. So
Hmm.
when I don't like something, I try and I find it quite interesting reading Naomi Wolf's recent book.
Hmm.
Naomi Klein's recent book about Naomi Wolf, about the mirror world, about
Yeah.
how you can look at something and you can either react to it or you can react
Yeah.
against it. And
Correct.
a lot of the time when I see things that I don't think are quite right and I can't quite work out why, I try and figure out what the opposite is. So, for instance, when I was sick of the new rock revolution, which was like garage rock bands in the early
Hmm.
2000s, I found the Kaiser Chiefs, who were being very British, very silly, they were like Dexys Midnight Runners. When there was this quote that I came up with a while ago, and it's one of the only things I think I've said that's been like widely quoted in things completely out of context. Um, but if you look at a handrail like a skateboarder does, it's no longer something to stop you falling over when you walk down the stairs. It's something you can do a flip onto and jump on backwards and jump off of. And if we look at every space and surface
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
something that you can do what it's not intended for, then that I think gets me excited because, like, for instance, with Spotify at the moment, like you can't communicate to your audience. You can only pay money for a marquee advert to tell them you've got a new release out.
Correct. Yes.
Like, but no one in the music industry is complaining about that. Like,
No.
towards the end of iTunes, the complete my album thing came out. Why wasn't the music industry pushing for, can you send an alert when the album comes out if they've bought the single? Like that should have been the norm. That should have been, and it
Correct.
seems it's like and I think so much of what's frustrating about being a music fan, I mean,
Hmm.
I get from when I try and get into film or TV, like you get into a TV show, the season ends, you have no idea when the next season's out, or you're
Hmm.
watching a season and there's a new episode each week, but it doesn't say what day. So when are you meant to come back and check for the new episode to be out? Like these are all really simple things which platforms could do
Yes.
more of. And I just think that if I could do the things that I wanted to do,
Yeah.
they would like. I got into media at probably the worst point in time when you could monetize media. Like I don't want to be a YouTuber, so it's like that's probably what I should have done from 2008 was become a YouTuber. Like I had no interest in like, and also it's like I love music. I make
Hmm.
the worst time to be a music journalist right now. Like every publication's closing, but in a way, there's an opportunity because there's too many music publications, and if you're the last man standing, then
Yes.
maybe there's an opportunity there. But if you
Yes. I
if you
call it
could,
filtering.
yeah.
Filtering. Yes.
But if you consider that most people only have like people over 40 with kids and jobs, they
Yes.
probably only have like 15 minutes a month to check out music, then
Yeah.
make it the 15 minutes that they want to spend is with you. Like that's like, so I think there's that. And it's like, I see everything as a form of cartography. So the art of making a map. And like, if you can start to map out different parts of, which I think comes with a lot of the world building that lots of artists that I like to do, but like until I can see where the map is of where we're going
Yeah.
next, like it's quite a fun challenge. And the
Absolutely. Any advice for the young seekers that who wants to get involved? You just sum it up in a few words.
I think really get to know yourself and
Hmm.
work out where, I know that sounds like a really stupid and kind of thing that lots of old people
No.
say, but I think lots of people think that they need to do the thing they see other people doing. Like, for instance, my politics are much more socialist. So it's like, why am I in a corporate capitalist music industry? Like, the
Hmm.
entertainment industry is so different to the music industry. Like,
Yes.
I want to be in the art industry, really. So it's like, and figuring that out took me quite a long time. Like, I want to release art, and art doesn't have a 9.99 price point. Art
No.
has an infinite price point, and it
Correct.
has a postcard price point. So it's like I want to be in the literary industry. It's like paperbacks and hardbacks have different prices. Like to
Absolutely.
then really think about what it is that you think is missing, what it
Yes.
is that the artist you love might need, because like one of my favorite interviews on the podcast was quite unexpected. I interviewed this
Hmm.
TikToker who does music industry advice called Atlanta. She's absolutely brilliant at giving advice, but I didn't know she started out running Florence and the Machine's fan website, ended up working on the management team, ended up working at a major label for years on some huge artist campaigns. But that came from being a Florence and the Machine fan and wanting to
Yeah.
make, because there wasn't a website for Florence and the Machine, like that. And that sense of what could you be doing, where are your skills, what skills could you develop, like that's the thing that's really important.
Um, Three questions.
Yeah.
If you can answer them as quick as you can, but on top of your head, three things. Number one, what is missing in the industry, music industry? What is missing?
A sense of value, like
Hmm.
people don't know what something's worth, and not every song is a line of data.
And okay, and what is the biggest challenge or problem right now the music business been having, and it's becoming a big problem?
I'm going to say misogyny. Like I think
Well,
there's lots of problems in this industry which could
yeah,
be fixed by people
yeah,
humanizing others a lot more. I think that's one of the really big ones.
very great answer actually. Logistically, what's the big challenge and problem that the industry facing?
Signal to noise. There's just too
Hmm.
much. There's no real focus. And as an ecosystem, we've not, again, it comes back to value, but like the music
Yeah,
press did a great job and had a great value, and no one wants to
yeah,
take out adverts on it or value it. So I think
yes.
there's a crucial cogs of the industry which we're allowing AI and algorithms to replace. And I think once we remove all the humans, we're just going to have like, how fun is it going to a self-service till?
Well, there's no emotions then.
Yeah,
Music comes from emotion.
yeah. And you need a. And
Um,
when was the last time you heard a robot tell you about a song it loved?
no, no, it doesn't work that
Yeah,
way. I think AI should be used as a tool, and I
yeah,
think that's what the industry waking up to it.
yeah.
Use it as a tool. Um, where is the future? If you know, you have a crystal ball. So far, from what I've been saying, through this interview, where's the future of distribution going?
Of dis-
Because yes, distribution, distributing music, is it gonna be nothing stays the same? Is it gonna
yeah.
be DSPs direct, or DSPs don't want to deal with artists direct, or is it gonna be the aggregators, the middle people, or is it gonna be DUI? Is it everybody, all artists gonna just deal? How does this whole thing in your vision 5 years from now, 3 years, with the race to AI and technology and all of this, how do you see the change in distribution? Could it be the same? No. I mean, digital first was physical retail outlets, and this, then digital came in, was a blessing. Wow, it's everywhere now. You can have fans that you never had. It's
Mm.
and people could hear your song immediately. The minute it get released, they're gonna hear it immediately. Whether you are on the other side of this earth or this side of the earth.
I
But
I think that we're going to need a change in format. Like, we're still browsing music on an Excel spreadsheet. Like, Spotify and
yeah,
Apple is not an exciting place to browse music. Like,
yes.
and I think spatial computing is a while away. Like, what Apple have
Hmm.
just launched, I think is
Hmm.
exciting, but
In a Provision, yeah.
there's like, I've just seen like a pair of sunglasses which you can have giant IMAX monitors in front of you just by wearing sunglasses. So that
Yes,
tech is
yeah,
coming.
yes,
Um,
yes.
but my thinking is that we will create spaces, and like the way in
Hmm.
which Grand Theft Auto has become a space where
Hmm.
people have consumed music.
Yes, yes.
If
Hmm.
Beyonce wanted to make you an art gallery to walk around,
Yes,
that could be both physical and something you could digitally bring as an AR
yeah,
filter into your house. Like, and
yeah.
to me, I think the I mean, I'd love to go through, like, there's so many great DJs.
Hmm.
They could drop their crate in my room, and I could go through their crate of records. Like, that to me is exciting, and
Yeah,
there's a value to that because they're going to limit what you can get. So I like,
interesting.
so for instance, I think Mubi, the video service, is brilliant because
Yeah,
it's only 30 films at a time, and they're only available for 30 days, and it's a curated experience. And I think we're going to shift from this all you can eat buffet to give me a there's someone I trust, give me a cluster of things. And I think that's quite a big leap from where we are right
hmm,
now.
yeah,
But we're already doing that with Marvel, or we're already doing that with Harry Potter or something. Like, there's all sorts of ways in which
yeah.
we box things up a bit more and package them. So
Uh,
if you could give me a magic wand, I would get Apple to completely rework the entire industry like they've done before. I think they're one of the few places that could do it. And I think they could create real world spaces where some records are only available. So you go on a
I think it's
pilgrimage
gonna
to
happen.
listen. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's my opinion on it. I think what's going to happen, you know, before we end this interview, great interview, actually, very
Thank
insightful
you.
and motivating. I would say you got metaverse, you got blockchain, you got AI, you got mixed reality, and I think all going to come in together
Mm,
somehow all together, and it will be a new era
yeah.
and a new way of listening, and for artists to release and monetize and control their rights and earnings and all of that,
Mm,
because as we all know, there's a problem in metadata, there's a problem in royalties, there's a problem in how should I say, in copyright. So
mm,
these are the main problems I think the industry facing right now with all of these things happening. But I think eventually all of this is going to be one world,
yeah. And it's
in my
like
own opinion. Yeah.
there's things like I saw the other day
Yeah.
in Romania, you can get the
Mm.
bus for free if you do 20 crunches. It's like a health thing they've got around the city.
Hey,
And it's
I'm
like,
down for that.
so if there was something where you had to like
Yeah.
walk for 20 minutes to hear the new Taylor
Yes.
Swift album,
Yeah.
or recycle a certain number of items to hear the new Max Richter album, like those kinds of things with kind of mixed reality are going to be so much more possible.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the bit where I'm like, how can we incentivize? How, like, I absolutely love playing Beat Saber in VR. It is one of the
Yeah.
most fun music listening
Yeah.
experiences, but also it's physical. And that to me is where I think we're going to start shifting. But
Yes.
VR, I don't think it's going to take a big leap for that technology to really come on. And it's like,
Yes.
but if anyone can do it, it's Apple, isn't it? So
Absolutely. Well, listen, for our listeners and viewers, a Soundbreak, I have to say, it's one of the most interesting conversation I had on the podcast of Soundbreaker, and I really enjoyed it. And thank you for coming on the show. And unfortunately, everything, all great things has to come to an end. I mean, maybe probably we'll do another volume 2 of interview with Sean. There's a lot to say, definitely about the industry, and he earned it. So this concludes today's episode of Soundbreaker. Please make sure you follow us on socials. Excuse me, socials. I'm a little bit sick. I have a little cold. That's why my voice is a little bit off. But stay tuned and for our new episode. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Bye
thank
bye.
you. Is my up.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the Soundbreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.